It started with a knock, just one, short, soft, and at a time when no one should be knocking. I'd been living alone in the house for a little over 3 months. It's this old rental tucked along a country road with nothing but trees and hills behind it. Quiet, peaceful, and cheap. Just what I was looking for after the breakup. The landlord was some older guy who didn't ask too many questions. He handed me the keys with a grunt and a warning. "Not a lot of folks stick around long here, place gets lonely." At the time, I figured he meant winter was rough. The drive to town was 20 minutes on a good day, but I liked the isolation, or I thought I did. The first night it happened was a Thursday. I remember because I'd just finished watching some true crime documentary on Netflix, something about a stalker hiding in an attic. I turned off the TV around midnight, brushed my teeth, and got into bed. The wind was picking up, loud enough to rattle the front windows, and the pine trees out back swayed like tall shadows. I woke up around 2:13 a.m. exactly. No sound, no bad dream, just awake. Then I heard it, and it was so light I wasn't even sure it was real. I held my breath, ears straining. Silence. I sat up in bed, the covers pooling at my waist. My bedroom faces the backyard, and there's a narrow hallway that leads down to the living room and front door. I stayed still for a full minute. Nothing. I told myself it was the wind, or maybe something fell outside. I went back to sleep. The next night, the same thing happened. 2:13 I woke up. One soft knock. Not frantic, not angry, just a gentle tap, like someone unsure they should be here. This time, I grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand. I crept down the hallway and peered through the front curtain. Porch was empty. Moonlight glinted off the gravel driveway. No cars, no footprints in the frost. But the knock kept happening. Always at 2:13. Always once. Always from the front door. By the fourth night, I was starting to feel a little unsteady. I double-checked the locks, moved a chair in front of the door like some cheap horror movie trick, and left my phone recording near the entryway. I didn't sleep, I just waited. 2:23 a.m. came. No, my breath caught in my throat. I stared at the door. The recording light on my phone flickered. I rushed over, yanked the door open. No one. Porch was empty. Cold wind rushed in and brought with it the scent of damp leaves and something else. A sour, almost metallic tang. I checked the yard. Still no footprints. No cars. Not even a stray animal. I played the recording back. The knock was there. Just one. Right on time. But there was something else in the background. A whisper, barely audible. I replayed it 10 times before I could make out what it said. It sounded like, "Left me in." I turned off the phone and stared at the door. That night, I slept with the lights on. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it. Stress, isolation. Maybe my mind was looking for patterns that weren't there. I even posted on Reddit, half-jokingly, "Weird nightly knock at 2:13 a.m. Should I be worried or just haunted?" A few folks laughed. Some told me to set up a trail cam or motion sensor. One user just commented, "Whatever you do, don't answer it." I laughed that one off until the 5th night. This time, it didn't stop at just a knock. At 2:13, I was already wide awake, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding. I'd moved a small table against the door, locked all the windows, even placed salt along the thresholds like some old superstition my grandma used to talk about. I froze. But then came something else. Scratch. From the back of the house. My bedroom window. Long, slow scratching, like someone dragging a fingernail across the glass. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared toward the window, where the curtains fluttered slightly. Then came a low thud, like something shifting just beyond the wall. I waited till sunrise. When I finally pulled back the curtain, there were 5 long scratches etched into the window. Too high for a raccoon, too wide for a cat, and too straight for any animal I know. They looked deliberate, like someone had used their nails. I called the police that morning. Small-town deputy came out, took a quick look, and shrugged. "Probably a prank," he said. "Kids in the area like to mess with newcomers." But he didn't look convinced. Before he left, he glanced at the window again and added, "Whatever it is, it hasn't gotten inside. That's the important part." He said it like that. Hasn't gotten inside yet. That was a week ago. I haven't slept properly since. The knocking still comes. Every night, same time. Sometimes it's on the front door. Sometimes the back. Once, it came from inside the attic. But last night was the worst, because I heard it not at the door or the window, but under my bed. The night the knocking started coming from under my bed, I thought I might lose my mind. I was lying there trying to drift off when I heard it again, the same soft knock, but this time it was accompanied by a strange vibration, almost like something was shifting beneath the floorboards. I sat up, heart hammering in my chest. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was the house settling? Maybe there was something under the floor, a loose pipe, a draft, anything? But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. I moved slowly, quietly, keeping my breath shallow as I edged toward the door. The hallway outside felt darker than usual. Colder, too, like the air was denser, pressing in from all sides. My fingers fumbled with the doorknob as I cracked it open, just enough to slip into the living room. The house was silent, save for the whisper of the wind outside. My phone was still on the coffee table recording, and I hesitated before picking it up. I could hear nothing, no more knocks, no more scratching. For a moment, I let myself believe maybe it had all been in my head. Then I heard it. Thud, thud, thud. It came from under the couch, not the bed this time. No, the couch. I froze, the blood draining from my face. I slowly crept forward, the light of the phone shaking in my hand. I reached the couch and squatted down to peer beneath it, half expecting something to grab me. The room seemed to close in around me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. There was no dust under the couch, no old socks, nothing, just bare wood. But I could hear the faintest scraping sound, soft, like a dry finger dragging against the floor. My mind raced. I felt like a fool. I had to be imagining this. I stood up quickly, turning toward the window. The moonlight had shifted, casting long, twisting shadows across the room. That's when I noticed it. The front porch light was on. I hadn't turned it on. I distinctly remembered turning it off before going to bed. I moved toward the door, my pulse quickening. I checked the locks again. All secure. Nothing out of the ordinary. But as I stood there, staring through the peephole, I saw him. A man, tall, thin, with wild, unkempt hair that hung in greasy clumps around his face. He was standing there, staring directly at the door. I couldn't make out his eyes, but I didn't need to. I knew he was watching me. His face was half covered with a ragged cloth, his expression unreadable. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just stood there. I couldn't breathe. I backed away from the door, trying to remain as quiet as possible, my body shaking. I grabbed my phone, my hands trembling as I texted my landlord. "Hey, there's someone on my porch. Should I call the cops?" I didn't wait for a response. I was too scared. I called the police instead, my voice shaky as I explained what was happening. The officer on the other end reassured me, saying they'd send someone out, but that it would take at least 15 minutes. I glanced back at the door. The man was still there, unmoving. I stepped away, pacing the room, trying to calm myself. The knocking hadn't stopped. It was still there, underneath the floorboards, under the bed, underneath everything. I felt it crawling into my thoughts, making the air thicker, heavier. Then came another knock, not from the door, not from the floor. This time, it was coming from the window. I snapped my head toward it, my heart dropping into my stomach. The man outside hadn't moved. He was still standing perfectly still on the porch, his face obscured by the ragged cloth. But the knocking came again, insistent. I rushed to the window and pulled back the curtain, eyes wide. The man's face was pressed against the glass. I don't know how long he'd been there, but his breath was fogging up the window. He was closer now, so much closer, and I could see his lips move as he mouthed something. I leaned in, my heart thundering in my chest. I couldn't hear him, but I could see his lips forming words. "Let me in." The knocking came again, harder, louder. I turned, bolting for the back door. I didn't know what else to do. There was no escape. He wasn't just at the front, he was everywhere, surrounding the house. I pulled open the back door and rushed outside, heart pounding, breath ragged. I looked toward the woods at the edge of the yard, half expecting to see something moving in the shadows. Nothing. But when I turned back toward the house, the man was gone. I ran back inside, locking the door behind me. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The knocks, the man, the whispers, and the feeling. The feeling that he wasn't just trying to get into my house. He was trying to get into me. I stood there, trembling in the silence. It felt like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I sat down, exhausted, my mind racing. The phone on the coffee table buzzed. My landlord had texted back. I wouldn't open the door to anyone, not in this area. You never know who's out there. I almost laughed. The irony was too thick to ignore. The police arrived about 10 minutes later. They searched the property, checked the front porch, the backyard. They found no one. No sign of forced entry, no tracks, no evidence that anything had even happened. They left me with the usual, "Call us if anything happens again" line, and I was alone once more. But I wasn't alone, was I? The knocks came again that night, and the night after that, and each time they came closer. It was on the third night that things escalated, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending like everything was fine. The knocking continued, relentless, each night growing louder, more insistent. It wasn't just beneath the floorboards anymore. It came from the walls, the ceilings, even the door frame, as if something was crawling inside the house, moving. That night, I sat up in bed, staring at the door, listening to the whispers that had started to accompany the knocks. They were faint, at first, just barely audible over the creaks of the house and the howling wind outside. But soon, they grew clearer. It wasn't just a voice anymore, it was a chant, soft at first, then growing louder, more desperate. It was as though the air in the room itself had thickened, absorbing the whispers, making them feel like they were coming from all around me. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself it was just the wind or the house settling, something to ease the anxiety twisting my gut. But then I heard it again, this time right by my ear. "Let me in." I jolted upright in bed, gasping for air. The whisper was unmistakable, far too close. I swung my legs over the side and grabbed my phone, the screen lighting up in the dark. My fingers were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. I checked the time. 3:13 a.m., the witching hour. Could feel the weight of the silence pressing in, suffocating. The whispers weren't coming from the walls anymore. They were coming from inside the house. I stood up, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet. My legs felt like lead as I approached the door, slowly, carefully, not sure what I was about to face. The knocks started again. This time, they weren't coming from beneath the floor. They were coming from inside the walls. Thud, thud, thud. The sound echoed in the hallway. It felt like it was all around me, inside my head, in my chest, rattling my bones. I opened the door a crack, peering out into the dark hallway. The house was eerily quiet now. Too quiet. My breath caught in my throat as I saw the shadow moving. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me. Maybe just the shape of the coat rack or a trick of the dim hallway light. But then the shadow moved again. It shifted. I froze. The figure in the hallway was thin, too thin, and hunched. It seemed to sway as if caught in an unseen breeze, its limbs long and disproportionate. It didn't have a face. Not one I could see anyway. The area around its head was just dark, void-like, like a black hole that sucked in all the light. The knocking was louder now. The whispers became screams. "Let me in," the voice echoed, not just in the room but in my very mind, clawing at the edges of my sanity. I slammed the door shut, my back pressed against it, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The whispers outside grew louder still, almost as if the figure was speaking directly to me now, as if it knew I could hear it. "Let me in. Please, let me in." I backed away from the door, my legs shaking beneath me. There was no escape. I couldn't run, couldn't hide. I could hear the figure moving, scraping along the walls outside, its long, distorted fingers tapping against the plaster, searching for a way in. The phone buzzed in my pocket, jolting me. I yanked it out and saw a message from the landlord. "You all right? Heard some weird noises around your place lately. Maybe it's time to talk to someone." I typed back quickly, my heart pounding in my chest. "I don't know what's happening. Something keeps trying to get in." There was a pause before the response came. "You need to leave. Get out of there tonight. It's not safe." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt my pulse in my throat. The house wasn't just haunted. Something was here. Something that wanted me. Wanted in. A soft thud came from the window. I didn't even need to look. I knew. I'd felt it. It was close. Without thinking, I grabbed my jacket and bolted toward the front door. The cold air slapped my face as I stepped outside, the sound of the wind and distant tree branches creaking filling my ears. The night was thick, oppressive. I was trapped in it. I could still hear the knocking. Not from the door this time, but from the windows, from everywhere. It was as if the house itself was trying to break free. I turned around. The figure was standing in the front yard now. It was impossible to make out its features. It was like the thing didn't even have a shape, just a mass of darkness, moving like smoke, twisting and undulating in a way that made my stomach churn. Its hands were long, spindly, reaching toward me, as though begging to pull me back inside. I couldn't stand it any longer. I had to leave. I turned, running toward the end of the driveway, my shoes slipping on the damp ground. The whispers followed me. "Let me in." They were coming from behind me, from the house, from the trees. It was the last thing I heard before I reached the road, but it wasn't the last thing I felt. The night was alive, and it was coming after me. I didn't stop running until I reached the gas station at the edge of town. My breath came in ragged bursts, and my heart pounded in my chest as if it was trying to escape. The cold air stung my skin, but I barely noticed. I tried to call for a ride, but the cell service was spotty, the bars flickering on and off like a dying light bulb. I kept glancing behind me, half expecting to see that shadowy figure following in the distance, its long fingers reaching out to claim me. But there was nothing, just the empty stretch of road. Even so, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. The gas station attendant, a sleepy-eyed man who seemed entirely too comfortable with the late hour, barely looked up as I approached the counter. "You need something, kid?" he asked in a drawl, his voice slow and disinterested. "I need help," I said, my voice more desperate than I intended. I think something's in my house. I think it's trying to get in. It's trying to..." Before I could finish, a loud crack echoed from the direction of the road behind me. I spun around, eyes wide. The darkened silhouette of my house loomed in the distance. It was a small speck in the vast night, but it felt as if it were closing in, as if the house itself was alive and reaching toward me. The streetlights blinked, casting eerie shadows that danced across the pavement. "I gotta go," I said quickly, turning toward the door. The attendant stared at me, his eyes vacant, as though he hadn't heard a word. "Suit yourself," he muttered, turning back to the small TV in the corner. I didn't even look back as I hurried out of the gas station, my breath now coming in shallow bursts. I started walking back toward the house. The urge to get back, to face whatever was waiting, gnawed at me. But I wasn't sure if I was ready. The house seemed quieter now. The whispers had faded, but the echoes of that voice, "Let me in," still echoed in the back of my mind. I couldn't forget it, couldn't escape it. When I reached the driveway, I noticed something strange. The front windows of the house were different. They weren't completely dark anymore. There were faces. At first, I thought I was seeing things, but then I saw it again. They were there, pressed up against the glass. Too many of them to count. Some were distorted, faces twisted and hollow, with eyes too wide, staring at me. Others had lips that moved, mouthing words I couldn't hear. I froze, a cold sweat prickling across my neck. My legs were frozen in place. The faces inside the windows weren't normal, weren't human. Their eyes didn't blink. They didn't seem to need to breathe. They were watching me. And worse, it felt like they were waiting for me to make a move. I couldn't breathe. The air around me thickened, the darkness pressing in, until I felt suffocated, as if the house itself were closing in, trying to trap me in its walls. The faces began to move, their mouths stretched into wide, hungry smiles. "Let us in." The sound of the words was muffled, but I could feel them in my bones. It was the same voice from before, now growing louder, more insistent. The faces didn't just watch. They pleaded. I took a step back, shaking my head in disbelief. This couldn't be real. There was no way. The things I was seeing, hearing, had to be a trick of the mind. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Something had taken root in that house. Something old, something hungry. The air turned colder, and I realized I was no longer alone in the driveway. A figure was standing just beyond the shadows. At first it was a blur, a shape swaying in the wind. Then it stepped forward, and I recognized it. It was the thing I had seen before, the figure from the hallway, the one that had been whispering in my ear, begging to get in. But now it was different. It was closer. Its face was just a void, dark and endless, pulling the light out of the space around it. Its limbs were too long, too thin, bending in ways that made me want to vomit. It tilted its head, as though it were sizing me up. "You're not supposed to be here." The voice wasn't just in my head this time. It was real, tangible, and it came from everywhere. The walls, the trees, the earth beneath my feet. I just could feel its eyes on me, though there was no face to see. It was like the void inside its skull was staring into my soul. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering in my chest. "Leave now. You're not safe here," it said. Its voice was cold, unfeeling. I didn't know how it knew what I was thinking, but it did. It knew. I turned and ran, not caring if the figure followed me, not caring if I fell. I had to get away from that place, away from whatever was trying to pull me in. But I heard it again, the whisper, this time inside my head. "Let me in." I didn't look back. I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of the woods, the bitter chill of the night biting at my skin, but I couldn't feel it. The adrenaline had long since numbed my senses. All that mattered was putting distance between myself and the house, the thing inside it. I stumbled into the clearing near the old oak tree where the streetlights failed to reach. My breath was ragged, my throat raw. The air tasted like smoke, but there was no fire. Just the thick, suffocating darkness. It had been hours since I ran from the gas station. I had no idea how far I'd gone, but the house I had fled, felt miles away now. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still there, looming, watching, waiting for me to return. A deep, guttural growl echoed from the direction of the house, though I couldn't see it. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I froze. The growl grew louder, more insistent, as if the ground beneath me itself was vibrating with it. I dared not turn around. I couldn't. The figure from the driveway had been a warning that I hadn't heeded. But now it was too late. I heard it before I saw it. The unmistakable sound of something moving through the trees. The sound of something large and unnatural. The ground beneath my feet shifted slightly, and then I heard the unmistakable crunch of leaves, a step too close. I spun around, but there was nothing, just the wind, pushing the dead leaves through the air. But then, I saw it. The faintest shadow in the distance, hovering by the tree line, just beyond the reach of the dim moonlight. It wasn't a person. It wasn't anything I could identify. It was a shape, a void, an absence of light. And it was moving toward me, gliding over the ground like it didn't have to walk at all. I didn't scream. I didn't have the strength left to make a sound. All I could do was stare at the shadow, paralyzed with a fear I had never known. The thing wasn't even trying to hide. It knew I saw it. And then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. Just gone. I didn't wait for the next moment. My legs moved before my brain could even process what was happening. I turned back and ran, my feet slapping the ground in desperation. The old oak tree was now behind me, and I could hear the sound of the wind, the rustling of leaves in the distance. I couldn't think anymore. There was no time. I had to get away. I don't know how long I ran, how far. It felt like hours, but in reality it was likely only minutes. But by the time I finally stopped, gasping for air, I found myself standing in the middle of the empty street near my house. How had I ended up back here? The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long, wavering shadows across the asphalt. I had been running, but now I stood still, staring at the house. The house that had been silent for hours. It looked different now, as if it were waiting for me. And then I heard it. A knock. A single, slow knock against the front door. It was too soft at first, barely a tap, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. Then, another knock. This one louder, more insistent. I knew what it was. I knew. That thing, whatever it was, had found its way in. It had waited for me to return, to answer the door. And yet, I was frozen. The knock came again, louder this time. "Let me in." The voice echoed, the same as before. But it wasn't just the voice now. It was more. It was everything. The air was thick with it. The walls seemed to breathe with it. The house was alive, and it was calling me. I could see the shadowy figure in the window, its face now pressed against the glass. The same void, the same empty skull. It didn't move. It didn't blink. It just stared, waiting. But I couldn't move. Then, the door creaked open. Slowly. Just a crack. A low chuckle rumbled from inside, like the sound of rocks grinding together. The figure in the window began to move, its limbs stretching unnaturally, as if it were about to step through the door and into the world beyond. The door opened further. Let me in. I didn't know what happened next. All I remember is the ground beneath me shaking, the house groaning as though it were alive, desperate to consume everything in its path. And then the world shattered. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the cold pavement, gasping for breath. The streetlights were gone. The house was gone. Everything was gone. There was nothing. I should have run. I should have never gone back. But what could I do now? The house was gone, the presence was gone, but the feeling lingered deep in my chest, a hollow, cold sensation that spread through my limbs. I wasn't sure where the house had gone, or if it would ever return. But I knew one thing for sure. It hadn't let me go, and it wasn't done with me.